In order to be eligible for special education related services under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA, there's 3 requirements. First, your child must be 3 to 21 years of age. Second, your child must have a disability that's listed in the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and we'll go through those categories in just a minute. And third, that disability must adversely affect your child's education. That is, it must hamper their ability to learn. Just those 3 things. That's all that's required in order for your child to be eligible for special education. Now, we're going to go through a simple overview of some of the requirements, and then we'll do the Code of Federal Regulations, which expands it even farther. And we've attached a really good booklet from the state of Nebraska that talks about the different requirements and it expands upon the requirements to qualify for each disability. With all that being said, just remember those 3 requirements. Number 1, your child is 3 to 21 years old. Number 2, your child has a disability that's listed under IDEA. And number 3, that disability adversely affects their ability to learn. Those are the only 3 things that are required for your child to be eligible for special education and related services. Here are the qualifications under eligibility. Must be 3 to 21 years of age. Must have a disability specified under the IDEA, which adversely affects your child's education. Now, one thing you might run into is medical versus educational, and sometimes you hear this in IEP meetings and in MDT meetings, that it's a medical condition, not an educational condition. What really qualifies it as a medical condition is there's no need for any educational services. Now, there might be a need for related services. If there's solely a need for related services, and what related services are, what I'm talking about there is therapies. If your child only needs physical therapy, only needs occupational therapy, only needs speech language pathology, but doesn't need any educational services, then it is considered a medical condition. If your child needs, in addition to occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech language pathology, any other therapy that they may require, if they need, in addition to that, an educational component, then your child falls under IDEA to receive services. So one thing that you may hear why your child doesn't qualify is because it's a medical condition, not an educational condition, just something to pay attention to. Number 3, let's look at the disability categories. There's 13 or 14 depending on your state, but the minimum has to be these things that are listed here have to be covered within the state somehow. So one category is autism, deaf-blindness, deafness, emotional disturbance, sometimes called behavioral disorder, a hearing impairment, and intellectual disability. It used to be called mental retardation, but this has recently changed. Some places called it mental handicap, but now it's called intellectual disability, multiple disabilities, orthopedic impairment, other health impairment. Other health impairment is chronic or acute continuing health problems that adversely affects your child's education that aren't necessarily listed here. Your child hasn't been diagnosed with one of these specific disabilities, but they have acute and chronic health problems, and there's identification of some sort of condition that's ongoing and adversely affects your child's education. Specific learning disability, and in the rules and regs we'll go into this more in depth. Congress had made some limitations upon specific learning disability. It can't be related to just lack of progress or a discrepancy. Let's say your child's performing at a 3rd grade level and he or she is in 6th grade. Well, that has to be related to a disability, not related to that they're just behind. Speech language impairment, traumatic brain injury, and visual impairment, including blindness. Developmental delay, a state can opt into for children up to 9 years of age. For younger children, it's almost always, the developmental delay category is almost always there. As they get a little bit older, 5 to 9, a state is allowed to, and a local school district is allowed to determine whether they want to serve children under this category of developmental delay from 5 to 9 years of age. And all that means is that your child is not developmentally where they should be. If they're, and they have a lot of different qualifications. One is if they test them and they're 2 standard deviations below where they should be, and I know that's a lot of wording, but that just means there's a big discrepancy from where they're developing right now and where they should be. Or you have a clinical diagnosis of a developmental delay, or the team has identified a condition that has high probability of resulting in developmental delay, a medical condition that's been identified that has a high probability of resulting in developmental delay, then the child can be designated as developmental delay up to 9 years of age. Nebraska has allowed school districts to decide upon this, and they've left ages 5 to 9 up to the school districts. Under 5 should be served as children with developmental delay. The disability cannot be based upon the lack of English proficiency. That is, if the child's behind because English is not their primary language, that's not a reason for special ed services. It may be a reason for more intensive services, but not necessarily special education services. Information must be from a variety of sources. It can't just be one test. No matter how bad the disability is, there is not a severity of disability that disqualifies a child from IDEA services. All children, virtually all children, qualify for IDEA services. Now, no matter how severe their disability is. Now, if the school says your child doesn't qualify for services under the IDEA, something that we don't address here, but you'll want to look into, is your child may qualify under Section 504 for services. The definition is a lot broader. It doesn't just include education. It includes things such as walking, talking, breathing, working, seeing, hearing, and also learning. So if any of these conditions are bothered by a disability, then you may qualify for 504 services, something to look into if you're told that you don't qualify for IDEA services. Now, if your child does not qualify and you want to contest it, the first thing is you can ask for an independent educational evaluation, which we describe in a section here, so you may want to go there and take a look. You can file a state complaint if you think there has been a procedural violation. We explain that also more. Or you can ask for a due process hearing if you have a factual dispute on whether your child qualifies or not. Next, we will turn to the rules and regs and go through those.